and welcome to Business Line. The European Central Bank has finally launched its highly anticipated stimulus program. Also known as quantitative easing, it's aimed at raising inflation, making borrowing easier and kick-starting the economy. That's if it works. If it doesn't, the program could take pressure off the region's governments to implement necessary reforms. We looked at the market's reaction on the very first day of the QE to see whether they finally got what they wanted or if it's too little, too late.
The European Central Bank's begun bond buying today with the aim of igniting inflation and growth. The scheme, which is part of its quantitative easing program, will last until at least September next year. But many critics say they're far from optimistic, especially given pressure on the euro from divergent monetary policies of the Fed and the ECB. Robert Halver, head of market research at Baader Bank, doesn't think it will be a success. There'll be more liquidity in the markets, but the banks will not use this liquidity to grant loans to the economy because the interest rate expectations are not all that high, he says, especially not in the periphery of the Eurozone. That means more money for the equity markets, the real estate market, and most of all, more debts, because it would be a waste not to take up loans on these conditions. German 10-year yields, the Eurozone benchmark, fell 6 basis points to 0.34%, a slide that stretched to Dutch, French and Belgian yields, among others. Government bonds are widely considered a safer investment, but rising interest rates and expectations of further hikes seem to have traders hedging their bets.
The new government of Greece tries to cope with the crisis on its own, and one of the biggest problems to solve is tax evasion. Athens found a very interesting and creative way to do it. If you go for holiday to Greece this summer, you can now not only spend money, but also earn some.
Ridicule and scorn have greeted a proposal by Greece's finance minister to engage non-professional tax inspectors to fight fraud. He intends to hire students and tourists to pose, after some basic training, as customers wired with recording equipment to catch tax evaders. This unemployed lady says if they want to tackle tax evasion, they should look elsewhere, to those people who are evading taxes and taking their money abroad. It's thought the idea of thousands of undercover new recruits working on behalf of the Greek authorities will change Greek attitudes to paying taxes.
If I live here, I will do it, because I earn money and I help the country to be better, because I think if everybody paid their tax, it would be better, because they can pay everything, right? So I think it's a good idea.
The proposal is one of 7 reforms described in an attachment to a letter sent to the Eurogroup. However, opposition parties, New Democracy and PASOK, have blasted the idea, calling it legally wrong.
Greece has a serious problem with tax evasion. Taxpayers currently owe around 70 billion euros to the state, according to the government data as for the end of 2014. The rates here are broadly in line with those elsewhere in Europe, but many Greeks say if they could pay less with no receipt, they'd go for it. The International Monetary Fund and Greece's other creditors have argued for years that the country's debt crisis could be largely resolved if government just cracked down on tax evasion. Tax debts in Greece equal about 90% of annual tax revenue, the highest shortfall among industrialized nations, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In an ironic twist, in January alone, the government's tax revenue were almost 1 billion euros below target. Many Greeks held off paying, hoping the new government would scrap several unpopular taxes and wipe out some arrears instead of spying on them. From tax to tech, we finally found out the details about Apple's smart watch. The gadget was first presented back in September, but at the latest event, the company finally gave answers to numerous questions. The one you're not going to like is the price.
Long awaited, much talked about and very hyped. The Apple Watch has been unveiled at a special show in San Francisco, 6 months after the smartwatch was first announced and 6 weeks before it's due to go on sale.
to the newest.
It's the company's first new product since the iPad in 2010 and the first under Chief Executive Tim Cook.
With the built-in speaker and microphone, you can receive calls on your watch. I have been wanting to do this since I was 5 years old. The day is finally here.
As with previous devices, Apple will be hoping to dominate the entire category by convincing consumers that its product is the one they need. Attributes like the ability to tap you on the wrist to alert you to an event will now come under intense scrutiny. In the end, the test will be whether people are prepared to part with hundreds or, for the top model, thousands of euros for the privilege.
We now know what is Apple Watch, what can it do, how could it look, and how much will it cost. But there is still more to say. This is it. This is IT.
We already knew a lot about the Apple Watch, but on Monday the company really made its case. So, why should we buy it? A wide array of features was showcased, from answering calls through tracking your physical activity up to finding a cab and paying in stores. How much will it cost? Pricing starts at $349 and goes all the way up to $17,000 for the finest 18-karat gold Apple Watch edition. Too bad they decided to scrap the usual $1 equals €1 policy. In France, one of the 3 European countries where the watch will ship as early as April 24, pricing starts at €399. It's the first time since Steve Jobs' death that the company's moved into a new market. GfK says Apple will once again act as a spearhead, driving the whole wearable sector to 51 million shipments in 2015. Strategy Analytics even forecasts Apple taking 55% of the smartwatch market with 15 million units sold. Little over-optimistic? Let's look at the pros and cons. Apple invested a lot in the design and will launch its device, as always, backed by an impressive number of third-party apps. But some say the interface is not immediately intuitive, battery life will force you to recharge it at least every night, and remember, the Apple Watch needs an iPhone. This last point could turn out to be a pro. If it succeeds, the Apple Watch will become a new engine for iPhone growth. That was it. That was IT.
That was it for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.